So with our general guidelines in mind of maintaining the flow of ideas, using good language conventions as you talk about your research, citing your sources, and knowing when to actually cite them after a series of sentences from the same source, if it's not paginated, uh, we're going to actually model then this behavior. So I am pretending to write a paper right now, or at least the paragraph of a paper, and this is the topic sentence of my my paragraph. So sometimes being successful is simply a matter of knowing if and when to quit. So with that said, I'm going to kind of go to the source that I was going to cite for this, which is an article called The Upside of Quitting. It's a radio podcast done by Freakonomics Radio. And, with that said, there's a specific big idea that I wanted to discuss in my paper, and it was this section right here. To help us understand quitting, we need to look at a couple of key economic concepts in this episode. So what I need to do then is I need to take my reader into the content of this material, and I need to do it smoothly on my own terms as a writer. So when I pull this up, one of the first things I should do is kind of think of specifically in, and I'm going to say in the radio podcast, The Upside of Quitting by in Freakonomics Radio. And I have to do that for this particular source for its own reasons, but the podcast addresses, and now I wanted to talk specifically about this right here, sunk cost versus opportunity cost. Now directly quoted, I'd be like, sunk cost is about the past. It's the time, money, and sweat and equity you put into the job or project, which makes quitting hard. Opportunity cost is the future. It means that every hour or dollar you spend on one thing, you're giving up an opportunity to spend that hour or dollar on something else. Well, I want these ideas to make their way into my writing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go specifically in the radio podcast, The Upside of Quitting. The podcast addresses two big ideas. I would say the two big ideas of sunk cost versus opportunity cost. Opportunity cost. Now, I'm not done with my discussion of this source, so I'm not ready to cite this source. I actually need to continue with the discussion and explain what sunk cost and opportunity cost. So I'm like, for example, and this is why we talked about using good language conventions, leading into your ideas with a transitional phrase. For example, a sunk cost refers to the amount of effort, time, money, and investment you have already made into a situation, job, or I'm just going to say a situation or job. Just take that. I'm not quite ready to cite the source because I have to also talk about sunk cost versus opportunity cost. I've done sunk cost. On the other hand, opportunity cost refers to the possibility of gains and success in moving on to another situation. And I'm going to use my dash. In other words, quitting. So if this is my discussion on this, I've led the reader into where I got this information and into the big ideas. I specifically talked about sunk costs. I've specifically talked about opportunity costs. Now, I want to go back to the article and test this. Right here, I said sunk cost refers to these things. And these were my words. This was my paraphrasing. And if I look back at the article, I feel like I expressed the ideas of the article, but I did so in a way that was my own words. So I don't have to directly quote anything here. I do have to cite this source because it's still not my idea. I look similarly at this. On the other hand, opportunity cost refers to the possibility of gains and success moving on to another situation. In other words, quitting. So once again, when I compare what I wrote, this was my summary or my own words that described the information in this article. Now, for the sake of illustration then, let's just assume that this is as far as I want to go with this source. I have gone and introduced the reader to it. I've done specific examples of this, and this is all the information I'm going to use from the article. What I need to do at this point, and I'm going to delete the period here, is now I have to cite my source. I have to give credit where credit is due. I'm following guideline number 4 right here. Like, I have to let the reader know that this wasn't my ideas. So I have this Word document formatted, and if I click on the references page and I hit, or the references tab, I hit insert citation, I simply click Freakonomics Radio, and boom. So this is a good example of how to use paraphrasing, how to use good language conventions, and how to cite your sources accordingly. Now, stylistically, if I'm continuing to write this, I have to explain how this evidence talks about success. I have to bring this big idea, this research, back to the idea of success. So my paragraph isn't over yet. I have to explain why I'm using this as a discussion on. All right, that's one example on how to do this.